Hello, everybody. Trying to see. Coming to you from my living room this Wednesday evening. And I thought I'd try it in here instead of the game room. The only thing I see is here may be a problem. I'm not on a desk. I actually have my computer set up on a stool, and I don't guess that'll be hard to type on and answer questions and talk with you. But I have a good lesson prepared for you, and I want to look today at Hebrews 11 and Genesis chapter 22. So we're going to look at that. I am wearing my camp shirt. I got a little nostalgic for the old camp days, and thought I would put that on. So, hello, everybody. If you're here and you are able to chat, let me know when you get here. And in the meantime, for those of you who have joined us that are at home with your families, turn to Hebrews chapter 11 and turn to Genesis chapter 22. And I'll go ahead, of course, that's in our title, but I'll go ahead and put that also in our live chat for those who are joining to see that. So, what I want to do is we don't have everybody here, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at Hebrews chapter 11. And as I said in our last live stream, we're going to go over the better country that they had, that they were looking forward to, and Abraham offering Isaac. So, two people popped up. Hey, Wendy Wade, and hey, Shonda. And I love your grid. Hello, I am down 10 pounds. Well, I think I'm up 10 pounds. Ha 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 ha. Because I've been eating, and Laura made a fattening dessert that I ate. And Rhonda's here. Hello, Rob. Hello, Rhonda. And ESG. Yay, Shonda. You can do this. Absolutely. We're praying for Shonda to get ready for a surgery. And the doctor said for her to get ready for this surgery, she's going to have to come down some. So we're come down some on her weight. So we're going to pray that she gets to do this for her surgery to come. And Angie, hello from Lacey, Angie, Blayton, and Will. Hey guys, so good to have y'all all here. And I hope everybody's enjoying their summer. Ooh, we are in the hot part of that summer, and gardens are coming in. We're at our house. We got a lot of canning going on, and some. I guess if it could be pickled, we've pickled it. We've done a lot of pickles, and the house smells good. I will say that. We've canned tomatoes and cucumbers and whatever else I guess you could can. So, still not through though. And God has blessed us. Really staying home with the COVID-19 has made us develop other, or I guess get them uh, better develop skills that we had on gardening and canning. And I've asked my dad, I know 100 questions on this and that of the garden, and I've asked some of Emily's uncles and uh, anybody I can ask about gardening, and so we've been blessed with a garden and see a few things we'll do a little different next year, but that's how you learn. You try things, you do it a little differently, and that way you excel. So, since we have so many here now, what I'd like to do is look at Hebrews chapter 11, and I'm going to start at verse 13. But before I start at verse 13, last week, let's do a little bit of review. Last week, we talked about the great woman, Sarah, and how that Sarah's faith in God helped her. And what did we say last week about Sarah that was different than any other woman in the Bible when she died? Does anybody remember what we said last week was different about Sarah that the Bible tells us when Sarah died? What did we say that was? Last week we said when Sarah died, there's something done a little differently than when all the other people died. I'm going to let you, if you're at home, turn and talk to each other about that. And we have one answer in. What do we have different from Sarah that we don't have from some other? And oh, yes, here they come in. Her age was given. JK. Hey, I know who that is. Jay Kellum, 75. How's it going? Good to have you. Her age was given. Yes. And how old was Sarah when she died? So let's just ask that. They stated her age, which was how old? Let's let you look and turn and talk and look and see when Sarah died. And I know that skips ahead of where we are. I wanted to mention that last week because we're mentioning how good Sarah was. So how old was Sarah when she died? Okay, here's an answer. Sarah was how old when she died? Sarah's age was given. In fact, not only that, I guess we could say too, the fact that Sarah's death was recorded, that was not recorded in fact, she's the first recorded woman's death in the Bible, if I'm not mistaken. And she was, I have two answers. I'm going to let some more of you answer because that's the preacher's wife and the preacher's daughter. Let's see how many more know it. How old was Sarah when she died? That's our trivia question for today. I think I'm going to like it in here. How old was Sarah when she died? Still, if you want to look at Genesis 23, verse 1, that's where you're going to find it. Genesis 23, verse 1. I just sent that to you. And, okay. All right, so the answer is 127. Sarah was 127 when she died. And Abraham married again. And I'm going to see how many of you now, you might have already known this, but Abraham married again. What was his second wife's name? Who was Abraham's second wife after Sarah died? I don't mean Hagar. I mean later. Hagar technically wasn't a wife per se, as was Sarah. Oh, here comes somebody. What was Abraham's wife? So I'm sorry, second wife's name? And I'll give you a hint on this one too. Go to Genesis chapter 25, verse 1. Genesis 25, verse 1. And you'll see Abraham's second wife's name. Here's an answer. All right. Yeah, here comes the names. All right. Genesis 25, verse 1 gives her name. Not much is said about her, but her name was Keturah. Keturah. And also, that was a pretty name, Keturah, but don't see too many people name that today, but a lot of people name Sarah, and that's fine too. So his second wife was Keturah. And what I want to look at right now is Hebrews 11, I'm going to read verses 13 through 16. Hebrews 11, 13 through 16. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Let's discuss these verses. And I'm going to start with verse 13 and look at what we see here. These all died in faith. Now, these all is not just a reference to Abel, Enoch, and Noah that are mentioned above, but now also Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, their children. This being a necessary inference, we have to infer them because of verse 15. If they're thinking of that country from which they went out, they would have had opportunity to return. And looking at this, not just talking about Abel, Enoch, and Noah, these first three didn't receive the promise of entering Canaan. That was before the promise was made. Abraham, and from then on, they died in faith. And this is a very important phrase. These all died in faith. Now, there's a lesson here. It is essential that dying in the faith is what counts. We have to remember that. It is dying in the faith that counts. What does Revelation 14, verse 13 say? So I'm going to let you look that up. Revelation 14, verse 13 has a very important message for us. I want you to look at that, please, and I want you to answer this question. Who does it say are blessed in Revelation 14, verse 13? Take a minute, look at that, and let's learn this lesson. Who does it say are blessed? I give you a hint. It's some of the dead. But which ones of the dead is it? It's blessed are the dead. What dead? All dead? What does the Bible say are the dead who are blessed? Oh, here comes some good answers. Yes. All right. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord. And so when we look at this in Hebrews chapter 11, these all died in faith. That should never be separated from this essential lesson that it is dying in the faith that counts. Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord. There's another statement of the same principle. And when you look at the parable of the laborers in the vineyard in Matthew chapter 20, and when you look at verse 8, let's go to that now. Let's go to Matthew chapter 20, okay? So we're going to go to Matthew chapter 20, and I want us to go to verse 8. And in this, let me read up to it. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now, when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said to them, You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you. So they went. Again, he went out about the sixth and the ninth hour, and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle, and said to them, Why have you been standing here idle all day? They said to him, Because no one hired us. He said to them, You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right you will receive. Now, let's look at this. What time of day did the master pay his laborers? That will be in Matthew 20 and verse 8. What time of day did the master pay his laborers? We have this wonderful parable on the laborers in the vineyard, and the payoff comes when? When were they paid? What time of day? Oh, here comes some answers. Any more? Anybody else look at Matthew 20 and verse 8? And if you're at home, look at that and see what time of day were they paid? Was it in the morning when they started? Was it in the afternoon when they were in the middle? No. Here we come. They were paid at evening. They were paid at evening. And so let's look at verse 8. The answer is evening. So when evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, Call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first. Okay, so according to Matthew 20, verse 8, I said, What time of day was it? He called them here at the evening had come. So here they are, and they were at evening, and they were paid at the evening. And oh, Cookie's here. Hey, Cookie, how are you? Good to have you too. Uh, and at the evening, uh, oh, okay, yeah, I could see how that could be easily mistaken, but yes, what we're talking about is Hebrews 11 said, "Blessed are," I'm sorry, Revelation 14 and 13 says, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord." And in Hebrews 11, we're told that these all died in faith. And there's the lesson. We need to never forget that what is essential is the dying in the faith that counts. And so we have to, as Revelation 2 and verse 10 says, we have to be faithful even unto death. And that's something that we need to make sure people know, that when they become Christians, that this is a lifelong commitment, that it's those who die in the faith, not those who give up, but those who die in the faith. So these all died in faith, not having received the promise. Not means here, not receiving the things promised. In other words, they did not receive physical possession of the land of Canaan, nor the eternal city of which Canaan was the type. The They all died in faith. They didn't get the representation. They didn't get they hadn't got any of it yet. They died looking in faith, looking in faith. And the reason for that is clearly looking down at verses 39 and 40. All these, having gained approval through their faith, did not receive what was promised, because God had provided something better for us, so that apart from us, they would not be made perfect. So they didn't, they had the faith, and they didn't give it. Now, looking at this, that they were seen them. Uh, American Standard says greeted them from afar, And you can look at this also in the King James. They they saw them afar off. They were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims in the earth. They saw them that in their mind they could see them, through their faith they could see them, and they saw them from afar. Here's how faithful they were. They saw God's ultimate promise to them. That was to their glory. That's why they're good examples for us. They accepted what God said. They had their trust in God that God would do what God said that they would do, and they were strangers. They confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Now I want you to think about something, and let's just look at this. What did Abraham live in? What did he dwell in? What did he live in? What did Abraham and his family, well, and Lot too, really, till we see him move into Sodom and Gomorrah, and that was an episode not covered in Hebrews 11, but uh, covers more on Lot. Notice Lot is not mentioned in this chapter, but what did they live in? And yes, I got an answer, and it is correct. It's from Cookie. It is yes, it's tents. They dwelled in tents. Now, thinking of this, let's remember he lived as tent. It lived in a tent as a stranger, as a pilgrim on this earth. He considered himself as one passing through the world. He considered himself as a stranger and a pilgrim, not making a permanent dwelling in it. And it's still, to me and to others, it's astonishing how we think of them with all the wealth that they had, great wealth, yet they never built a house here afterward. I mean, they could have where God called him from, I realize, but never built a house. They accepted and made themselves content in their status as strangers, sojourners, pilgrims in an alien country. Now, pilgrim, I want you to look at that word pilgrim and look at a little bit of the meaning of it. Pilgrim literally means one who crosses the field, one who crosses a field. And let me tell you why. It has an interesting background to it. Back in the days of the Crusades, in the Middle Ages, where there were big pushes to go to the Holy Land and take the Holy Land, and by that I'm talking about Palestine area, Jerusalem, all of that. It was under Muslim rule, and there were big pushes to go and to take that back. We call those the Crusades. And so often people would go to the Holy Land to help with this effort and fight for this effort as men going to join the army today. And it was really nothing all across Europe for someone to see somebody walking by themselves, a lonely traveler, crossing a clearing or a field on their way to the Holy Land. Where you going? I'm going to the Holy Land, going on going on this crusade here to capture back the Holy Land. And so the word pilgrim literally meant one who crosses the field. It was one who was by himself crossing this clearing, going on his way to the Holy Land. And so came to have this very rich meaning of somebody who left everything they had and all their worldly possessions behind, going toward a sacred goal. And some of them were quite wealthy who did that. Some of them were nobility who did that and would leave not only lands but positions of power and prestige where they were to go and to fight this. And so this word is particularly fitting here when it is applied to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These were pilgrims, and they were like this. They were sojourners. They were strangers. They were traveling through, and we sing the song, "I am a poor wayfaring stranger." And while traveling through this world of woe, they could have sung that song too, couldn't they? That part of it, at least. And so here we have these strangers and pilgrims on the earth, and they make it clear that they are seeking a country of their own. And truly, if I'm sorry, for those who say such things, declare plainly that they seek a homeland. They knew what they were doing. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. Now, let's make it clear something that we need to know on both of these, verse 14 and 15. If they say such things, they made it manifest here. They made it plainly. They were seeking a country. They're seeking this country of their own. Abraham even said this in Genesis 23:4. I am a stranger and a sojourner among you. Give me a burial site among you. I may bury my dead out of my sight, when he tried to get the cave of Machpelah. And that's where later on all of them were buried. And he even says, I'm a stranger. I'm a sojourner. They said it plainly. And that's not just something that we look back and admire Abraham for, but it was something that he said about himself. And Jacob, later on, we'll see Isaac, and then we'll see Jacob generations later. When he goes before Pharaoh, he says, the days of my years of my pilgrimage, my sojournings, are 130 years. Genesis 47, verse 9. They said themselves they were pilgrims. Even later on, David, if you look at Psalm 39:12, he said, hear my prayer, O Lord, and give ear unto my cry. Hold not thy peace at my tears, for I am a stranger with thee, and a sojourner, as all my fathers were. David said he was one. And so, and needless to say, this is the only proper attitude of Christians. For Paul even said, while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. 1 Corinthians 5, verse 6. Paul declared that. And Peter also, he admonished Christians. He said, pass the time of your sojourning in fear. 1 Peter 1, verse 17. Or conduct yourself during the time of your stay here on earth, New American Standard says here, we have a stay here on earth. It is a place really we stay and not really live. It's not our true home. And so our home being in heaven. And so looking at that, they themselves said that they were pilgrims on a journey. And if indeed they had been mindful of that country from which they'd gone out, here they would have had opportunity to return. We have to remember something when we look at this. They would have had opportunity to return. These patriarchs were volunteers. Here, the Hebrews writer flatly declares it. He says they could have gone back if they'd wanted to. If they'd have thought of where they came from, they could have gone back. Kind of like when several of Jesus' followers in John chapter 6 turned away from him, and he turns to his apostles in John chapter 6, verse 67, and says, "Do you want to go away with them too? Would you also go away?" And they had the choice at that time if they would have wanted to, where the rest of the people, the rest of the crowd followed him no more. Verse 66, walked with him no more. Jesus said to the 12, "Do you also want to go away?" The beautiful question is returned. And Peter, but Peter is one person I really want to meet. I can't wait to meet him. Peter answers Jesus's question with a question. "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Also, we have come to believe and know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God." How strong was Peter's faith? I wish when we get on a Peter knocking sermon that we look at this and look at John 6 and verse 68, 69. And when Jesus talks to the 12 and asks them, "Do you also want to go away?" We need to remember that Peter was the one who said these beautiful words. "We have come to believe and know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Where would they go to now? How could they leave this? Jesus answered, "Did I not choose you?" And I get the feeling here, of course, he says one of you's the devil, talking about Judas, but I get the feeling of the love, the camaraderie between Jesus and his apostles. "Did I not choose you?" I chose you, yes. Even though one of you is a devil, I chose you. But where would these patriarchs go if it were not for God? They knew that they looked for this heavenly country. God had set this up for them. They looked for this heavenly country. They could have returned. And every Christian, we need to keep in focus at all times that you're not forced to serve the Lord. I read a book. I had it right here. Of course, now I've mislaid it, but I had a book where a preacher was saying just things that he personally believed. And he said, "I do not believe in tracking down church members to make sure they're doing right. That should be something that you already know to do and should be doing." And Christianity is not a forced religion. No one is making you. No one's conscripted, as the saying goes, to serve the Lord. And if someone prefers the world and what the world has to offer to the eternal things of God, they're free to do that. They can go for life's fleeting joys and have a good time here. It's their choice. And as for the world, with all the world's treasures, the scripture warns us over and over again that these things don't satisfy. They are not capable, they have the incapacity to satisfy the seeking heart of man. Truly, Matthew 4 and 4, Jesus said, "Man shall not live by" what? Put it in there. Let this be a good uh, review for you. "Man shall not live by" what? Matthew 4 and verse 4. We even sing it in a song. "Man shall not live by," absolutely, here come the answers, "bread alone, Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. That's what we live by. We're not looking at the world with its pleasures. I like the song we sing, glorious things of thee are spoken, Zion, city of our God. And then one of the verses says about the earthly pleasures, all is boasted pomp and show, solid joys and lasting pleasures, none but Zion's children know. So fading is the worldling's treasures, all his boasted pomp and shows, solid joys and lasting pleasures, none but Zion's children know. You know who the most frustrated people on earth are? The people who've sought the world alone. And if they found it, or if they didn't find it, the result was negative either way. People who found treasures and then they find out, I'm not happy now. People who didn't find it, for sure they're not happy. It's negative result either way. And I want to read to you this story that I found about a man who was a tourist, and I want to read. I've moved over from the live page to this page. A tourist was warned that a bridge was out on the main highway, and he was directed to take a very unattractive detour. The road ahead was straight and clear, and he went right ahead, thinking to himself, that must be an old sign. Surely the bridge is not out now. 13 miles farther on, he came to the missing bridge, turned around, and headed back to the detour. And almost at once, after turning around and heading back, he came to a well painted sign. It sure was, wasn't it? Well, in spiritual things, those who take the broad and easy road instead of the way of the cross, they're going to at last know that what God said is true. I thought that was a cute story. 13 miles is a pretty good detour. And so here they would have had opportunity to return. They could have, but they didn't. But now they desire a better country, that is a heavenly one, wherefore God is not ashamed of them to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. He is not ashamed of them. Uh, not ashamed of them. They were not ashamed of. They were not ashamed of him. He was not ashamed of him. Now, so many times later, and I'm talking about this phrase right here. God is not ashamed of them. God's not ashamed to be called their God. And later, you're going to see God referring to himself. And years later, he's going to refer to himself as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. For example, Exodus chapter 3, verse 6, when he appears to Moses, God was not ashamed to say, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God was not ashamed of these three. We call them the three patriarchs. We sing the Wandering Jews, and we holler their names out in our vacation Bible schools and camp weeks. And God was not ashamed to be called them. He prepared a city for them. Uh, Looking at this prophetic sense, prophetic tense, where he said, I've called my out of Egypt, I have called my son. Hosea 11, verse 1. Sometimes God would make a prophecy and speak it in the past tense as if it were already done. He has prepared for them a city. And this very well could be what we're talking about here. Jesus said in John 14:2, I go to prepare a place for you. The city here mentioned by Jesus, the one mentioned here in Hebrews, that's one city. That's not two. Uh, you'll see, for example, Luke 13:28, that place will be weeping and gnashing of teeth when you see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and all the prophets in the kingdom of God, but yourselves being thrown out. Here they are. Here are these three. Here they're in the kingdom of God. Here, people are not allowed in. He didn't prepare two places. Is what I'm getting at. But God not being ashamed of his servants is contingent on us not being ashamed of God, not being ashamed of Christ, not being ashamed of his gospel, not being ashamed of the church, or anything the Lord has taught in the scriptures. We don't need to be ashamed of that. What did Paul say? Romans 1:16, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. What did Paul tell Timothy? In 2 Timothy 1, verse 8, therefore do not be ashamed of the testimony of our Lord or of me as his prisoner. Join with me in suffering for the gospel according to the power of God, 2 Timothy 1:8, and that's the New American Standard Version. And Mark chapter 8, verse 38, whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in glory and the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So, the place where they desire is the place where we desire as well. So, what that leaves us to now, that leads us up to the verses about Abraham offering Isaac. And like I said, in our last class, we're going to talk about that heavenly country and then Abraham and Isaac. So, I don't see me getting much into Abraham and Isaac and really doing it justice. So, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to read the Hebrews account of it, and then we'll go back to the account in Genesis. People have done series of sermons on this very incident itself. But I'm going to read Hebrews 11:17 and through 19. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called, concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. Now, this story is found in Genesis chapter 22. So let's go to what is said of him in Hebrews 11:17. We see that another thing that Abraham did by his faith was when he was tested. He was offering up, he offered up Isaac. Now, he gladly received this. Here, many have called this, and I hesitate to say one thing over another, but I must agree, if it's not the most, it is one of the most outstanding cases or outstanding demonstrations of faith in all the entire history of faith. You know, there's a lot of tests to people's faith throughout the Old and the New Testament. Noah. Of course, we're going to read some of them here in Hebrews 11. We could go on. Noah was one, and Daniel who suffered to be put in the lion's den. His faith was tested. Esther, who suffered death herself when she went into the throne room of Ahasuerus. And Gideon, oh, we could go on and on and on. But the faith to give up your son, that faith, that test was given to Abraham. And what do we call Abraham? Who do we call Abraham so often? The father of the faithful. It is, of course, scary to do something that may end up in your life being lost. It's not fun to do something like Noah, where people make fun of you and your name is no doubt a byword among everybody, and you've dragged your family's name down. But to give up your very son, that test, well, that trial was put to Abraham. The most astounding, perhaps, demonstration of true faith in God. And Abraham's faith here has already been cited in Hebrews. But these verses just give a more, I'm going to say overwhelming example of it. The students of God's word throughout the years, in all ages, since Abraham, they've all marveled at it. And many have said it's the strongest illustration of faith. It's remarkable, to say the least. Here, someone has said he really wasn't tempted, but he was tried. Going through a trial, he wasn't just tempted to do something wrong. He was actually in the middle of this doing something here. And there is a difference between a temptation and a trial. It was by all means a test. And looking at this, looking at how he came through, is there's no words for it. I also do not like the way Hollywood portrayed this in one of the movies about Abraham, where he's told to give Isaac up, and immediately he tells God, no, but then he finally comes around to doing what God wants. No, that's not the way the Bible says it. I immediately started to do it. He rose up early in the morning to do it. But like I say, we're at the end of our study time now. And I did not want to just gloss over the part of them waiting for a better country, because that is very important. So what we'll do, we'll continue our study here next week with Abraham and Isaac, and offering Isaac. I feel like we've only scratched the surface on that one, because we have. And what we'll do next week is I'm going to go back to Hebrews. We will go back to Hebrews verse 17. We're going to talk more about it from Hebrews, and then from Genesis 22. Offered up his only begotten son. We're going to talk more about that, but let me say this. We do know that this phrase is used again of one other person in the Bible. And who is that? Let's just end with a good. We're going to end, and we may do it again next week for a review. But who else in the Bible is the phrase "only begotten Son" used? So you type that in here. You turn and talk about it in your homes. Where else, or who else, does the Bible talk about as being an only begotten son? Waiting for some answers. All right, good. Here's one. I give you a hint. Look at John 3:16. John 3:16. Oh, here comes some more. Who else did the Bible refer to as someone's only begotten son besides Isaac of Abraham? Okay, and here come several answers. And of course, this is Jesus. God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Well, John 3:16 is not the only place that calls Jesus that. John calls him that. In fact, the only two writers who use this phrase are the Hebrews writer of Isaac and John of Jesus. John chapter 1, verse 18. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him. That was John 1:18. Now, we talked about John 3:16. For God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Skip down 2 verses to verse 18, you'll see the phrase again. He who believes in him is not condemned, but he who does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. That's John 3, verse 18. Now, John says this again, but not in the Gospel of John, but in the letter of 1 John. 1 John chapter 4, verse 9. In this, the love of God was manifested toward us, that God sent his only begotten Son into the world that we might live through him. So there we see the phrase 4 times used of Jesus, 1 time used of Isaac, only begotten Son. Now, wait a minute, you may say. Isaac wasn't Abraham's only begotten son, was he? I thought Ishmael was there too. Let's talk about that next week, okay? So we're going to talk about that phrase, only begotten son, next week. I also want us to look at some very interesting things that we can look at with Isaac. And I tell you what, there is a lot of similarities. Isaac, even though the Bible does not call him a type of Christ, there are so many similarities between Abraham offering Isaac and the crucifixion of Jesus that one man gave his Bible class the assignment to see how many similarities they could find, and they found 30 similarities between Abraham offering Isaac and God offering Jesus. So between now and then, now and our next time that we meet Wednesday, if you want to see how many you can find similarities, it's a very interesting study. You can find lists on the internet, and they're very. Some of them are good. I make sure it really is one, but I'm going to share these 30, Lord willing, from this man's class next week. And I want to say thank you to everybody for joining in. Let's remember everybody on our prayer list. If you have a prayer request, I thought about putting up a board at the building for us to put things on, and then I remembered, and I think Emily reminded me, we have a board. It's online, so we have a place on Facebook for you to put prayer requests. Please put them there and let us know so that we can all be praying for them, okay? And then we can have that already when we get to worship Sunday. I can read those, but let's keep everybody that's on our prayer list in our prayer list. And thank you to everybody for joining us. And we will meet Sunday at 11. It may be that the requirement to wear masks will be stricter then. Statewide from the state. If there are some more restrictions on that, I'll try to let you know. But it may be that the mask requirement gets a little stricter and that we're all required to. We kind of been doing it if we wanted to, but uh, if we didn't want to, that's fine. It may be that I know, I believe I was told in Tuscaloosa it definitely was. So, uh, Emily said, I tried to put the link, but I don't know if it worked. It is in GroupMe and Facebook Dovertown Lifelines. That's our prayer requests. That will get your prayer requests there. Please put them there so we can pray for them, and we can already have them so we can announce them Sunday, and I'll already have them Sunday to announce. And it already be there, and I can announce it. We won't have to rely on everybody in the audience to remind me what we're supposed to be praying for. Please put them there. And in the GroupMe Facebook, uh, this says Governor Ivey enforced a mask ordinance statewide. So it may be that we just be like Halloween, have a masquerade party. Well, that's not really what good way to put worship, I know, but we may be having to wear a mask. She enforced a mask statewide. I guess there's no maybe to it if that's the case. And I'll try to say more about that when we do our all call later on the week for Sunday. Thank you everybody for joining us. And I want to try to get back with you on our Zoom meeting for our young people. And I want to try to get back with you about our mask situation for worship. Again, we will meet at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning for a 30-minute worship. We went over 35 or so, but we try to keep it at that length. And we will meet at 2 o'clock here on YouTube again, the Lord willing, that we can have our worship here. I love you all. Stay safe, stay hot, stay hydrated in this hot weather. Drink water, and let's keep ourselves safe. And Lord willing, I'll see you then. God bless you. Have a good week.